The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hi, this is Ashley Eckstein, the voice of Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars, and you're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars podcast. May the Force be with you.
You're listening to the Secrets of Star Wars, episode 131.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hey everyone, I'm Angela Sealana, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away, including the deeper themes and meanings. Today, we are picking up where Andrew, Robert, and Brandon left off last week with the Andor series. And joining me today are two more of our new Secrets of Star Wars panelists. We've got Jason Eugea. Hello, Jason.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. I'm glad that you're here. And joining me also with Jason is Patrick Mason. Hello, Patrick.
Hello. Wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. And many more invites to come. So we want to know who you guys are. So Patrick, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your love of Star Wars?
You know, I think my love of Star Wars began as a kid. I watched episode 4. I always think about it as the first one, but episode 4 with my dad. Probably, I don't know, 10 or more times every time I saw him. You know, it was that and the Transformer movie. Real big influences on my early life. And from there, it just sort of sprung into like later love of Star Wars, you know, seeing episode 5, really falling in love with the character growth, the character arcs, episode 6. And, you know, episode 1 came out when I was in high school, and I remember going to the midnight showing, and despite a lot of my friends really loving it, despite a lot of the criticisms, and sort of, you know, the kind of rebirth of Star Wars that happened from there, and just kind of falling in love. And then when the special edition versions, going to see them with my dad in the theater, and that being sort of a big experience for me and him in our relationship and sort of Star Wars. And then, you know, high school and college, I was a nerdy kid. And so instead of staying out and partying on a Saturday night, I was out with my 2 or 3 buddies till 2 a.m. in a parking lot or in somebody's driveway, talking about Star Wars. I was talking about the latest book we read, or you know, from the extended universe stuff, or the latest movie, or the character, and going into depth about Darth Vader and his, you know, weakness as a person, and his redemption arc and that kind of stuff. And so since then, Star Wars has always just sort of been, you know, part of my life. Every Christmas, I get a couple of T-shirts from my parents, and they are invariably Star Wars themed shirts.
That's so cool. That's awesome. And we also, of course, have the wonderful Jason Eugea with us. And Jason, I know that in our kind of behind the scenes Slack channel, you've shared a photo of you in a Mandalorian helmet. So tell us a little bit about that and about your Star Wars fandom.
So I was born in 1977, but later in the year, so I missed episode 4, or original Star Wars. But I remember I remember watching Empire Strikes Back on my uncle's Betamax when I was knee-high to a grasshopper, but I don't think I got very far past the ice planet scene before I'd get up and run away, do something else. But one of my first earliest memories is going hand in hand with my dad to see Return of the Jedi. That's one of my first earliest memories. So it's sort of been with me my whole life, been stuck there. I never really got into the books or anything in the 90s. But of course I always had all the toys, and me and my high school buddies my nerd friends would talk about it. And then, of course, I remember going to see episode 1 with everybody, making sure I had tickets early so I could see it the first night. Same with episode 2 and episode 3. Then when, I've always gone to parties as a Star Wars character or something, but Disney Plus lit everything on fire again. And I really loved Mandalorian because it takes the look back to the 70s and the 80s. If there's an explosion, it's sparks instead of the big billowy CGI stuff. So it sort of puts it all back where it belongs, in my opinion. And then listening to you guys on this podcast, I got into a little bit of the Clone Wars, but I've watched all of Rebels. I absolutely love Rebels. And I can't wait to see where it goes, especially with Ahsoka coming up and all of that. So, and the Mando helmet, we got to host a Star Wars themed table at a costume party, and I used that party as a little gotcha to, once my wife signed up, I said, well, now I need the Mando helmet. So, and then, nice. And then I wore that same helmet to my twins' graduation, while they were walking down the aisle, and they graduated in a class of 9. So everybody knew who I was.
Wow.
So they were awfully embarrassed.
Oh, that's great.
That's awesome.
Well, definitely dedicated fans here. So we have some good discussion ahead, I know. And all right. So now that we have a lot more familiarity with each other than Cassian has with his teammates, let's go ahead and start with episode 4 of Andor here. And the episode is called Aldani. The official summary is: out of options, Cassian is recruited for a dangerous mission to infiltrate an Imperial garrison. So let's first of all talk about first impressions. So about this episode, and then also just where we are in general in the series. Who wants to start off?
Well, I'd kind of like to mention the flashbacks in the first 2 episodes. I think they did a lot better job on flashbacks than they did in Book of Boba Fett. In Book of Boba Fett, they really could have just put all that in chronological order instead of using the flashbacks, because they told so much story in the flashbacks. I think in this one, they used that a whole lot better in those first 2 episodes, just to get that out there, show, where he came from when he was a kid, and then how it paralleled what he was dealing with as an adult.
Okay. And what about the just Andor in general? Are you enjoying it? Is it for you? What are you thinking right now?
Well, this last episode left me on a cliffhanger. I'm ready to see where it's going to go with the dinner party and the heist and all of that. It just sort of left a whole lot hanging, ready for next week.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was really thrilling. Yeah. What about you, Patrick?
So I think, Andor is a more adult themed show, right? We've kind of broached that with the, semi-opening scene being very Blade Runner. I think the guys nailed it in the last episode when they mentioned that. I was like, oh yeah, onward, and with the brothel, and with Andor, shooting a guy in the face who's on his knees in prayer position, right? So it's very clearly the theme is more adult. But what I really liked about the last 3 episodes, and especially this last one, is it's adult in the relationships. We're seeing, interestingly enough, we're seeing different management techniques, and we're seeing inter-office politics, and we're seeing how things can go terribly wrong when you have 2 company men doing something together. We've seen like relationships between adopted individuals and their parents, and kids in trouble and their parents, like even though they're not kids, adult children. And now we're seeing a relationship that is a marriage that is faltering, or someone in trouble, or there's issues with it. And I'm loving it. I really am. And Andor in general, I'll put it this way. I've suffered a lot of disappointment with a lot of the stuff Disney has put out more or less recently. And I came in with a pretty low bar for Andor because I was just like, okay, they're going to do it to me again. Like, I'm going to get all hyped up watching the previews and the trailers and everything. And so far I have not been disappointed. I very much have liked what they've done with it, and that they've taken it to like adult places that aren't adult places. I don't know how else to put that, but you know, the stereotypical, you know, sex and violence being adult themes, but the reality is like real adult stuff is about complex relationships and how the people interact in them. And I'm really enjoying that thus far in Andor.
Great. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if this is a disagreement necessarily, but I'll put it this way. I typically Andor, like this show, is not something I will watch at this point in my life. Previously, before some kind of health situations, like I was very into like the most stressful thing you can watch. But, you know, you're talking about adult relationships and complex stuff, and that can get kind of stressful and tense. You know, it's not that I don't like it, but it's just that nowadays I try to make my entertainment something that's like making me happy or like laugh or something like that. So, you know, I mean, that's one thing there, but I care about Andor obviously because it's Star Wars and because I care about the story and the characters, and it's informing, you know, something about a character that, you know, Cassian Andor has become pretty important to me because Diego Luna is playing Cassian. And, you know, if y'all have been with SQPN for a while, you might know that I have Mexican ancestry. So, you know, I'll kind of touch on that later and just how I think that's affecting the story. But, you know, really, it matters to me to see someone who looks like my family and sounds like my family. Some people, you know, that means they got to have the closed captions on so they can understand him. But it just, you know, having the community be prominent in Star Wars now, it makes a big difference. So I'm definitely enjoying that. I think B2 Emo might be my new favorite droid.
Yeah, Disney's gotten really good at churning those out, right? The droids, they're amazing.
They are. They just seem to get better and better.
I wonder if they have just a creator just for that. Yeah. Just to make sure they have good droids.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so there are very few healthy expressions of joy or love, I would say, in this show. And I don't know if that makes it more adult, but it definitely makes it to where adults really are the ones that can kind of just handle, you know, and process more so. So let's go ahead and just kind of start off and talk about maybe one of the more intense characters, I would say, which is Luthen. And so by now we've gotten to with episode 4, we've spent a lot more time with Luthen and we have gotten to know his character a little bit more. There are some moments where I would say he comes off as like an abusive father figure, like claiming to know you, claiming to know what is best for you or want the best for you, but ultimately like is motivated by his own interests. There's plenty of shouting. There is imposing, you know, himself, like a manipulation in there. So I think, you know, some people might interpret that as his attitudes being, you know, based on his situation, the situation that he's in, and he feels a lot of pressure. But what do you guys think of Luthen right now? What is your impression of him as a person? And then also, what do you perceive as his motivation for the way that he acts? And do you agree with what I'm saying?
I guess I hadn't thought about it like you were saying, it being an imposing father. I saw him as more of the general that's needing to take action to make something happen. There's sort of we'll talk about him later, I think, but Pedragus,
right, yeah,
the guy that's in charge of ISB,
yeah,
Partagaz, yes. He's sort of the same get it done right now situation, but just in a more formal way. Whereas I think, the rebellion is so fledgling at this point that he's just having to tell Andor what he needs, in that manner. But I almost wondered if there was the way he was able to put on all that uniform or the different dress and the rings and the wig and everything, and then literally shift his mindset and his whole body stature and everything, his smile and all that little scene where he's having to practice. It almost made me wonder if he's just really that good of an actor as the character. Obviously, Stellan Skarsgård's a really good actor, but is the character a good actor, or is he some sort of sociopath? I'm not sure.
I would probably go with a former. But Patrick, what do you think of Luthen?
I really, really enjoyed this episode as far as diving into Luthen and how he is and how he's set up. I think from a spycraft perspective, his job and his front is amazing. Like, if I was going to go into spying, that would be it. Like, especially in the Star Wars universe, you could get away with going to all kinds of places that would be like restricted, or no, you can't go there. But like, I'm just an antiques dealer, I'm just in this, faraway Jedi temple to pick up these things because I want to sell them, that kind of a thing. I think as a character, he strikes me very much as the stereotypically thematically trope. The trope you see in a lot of spycraft movies is that there is an older guy, the older guy who's been through, the older guy who teaches them. In the Bourne movies, there is an individual at the very beginning, the first Bourne movies, who basically teaches Jason Bourne how to do his craft. And in the end, he gets killed by his government, for doing that. And so I kind of feel like that's where this guy fits in. He is sort of the beginnings of what would be the intelligence or counterintelligence agency within the rebellion and how that's going to operate. And I don't know if sociopath's kind of the right word, but it may be sort of a learned sociopathy. It's sort of like, I have to constantly watch my back at all moments. I think that really plays out in the scene where he watches Mon Mothma's car pull up and he immediately notices that's a different driver. So everything I say to her has to either be in code or in secrecy, because I don't know who this person is and I don't trust them. And I think it's interesting the way he comes at Andor, because he never really explains himself. When Andor asks questions, he just sort of deflects and brings it back to Andor and forces Andor to just keep telling him more and more and more about himself, or own up to the lies he's telling Luthen. So Luthen's one of those, like, I don't think we've seen enough of him yet to really get a feel for how he is, but I do like, psychologically speaking, you kind of have him as that potential father figure for Andor, and that might explain some of the choices we see Andor make, especially coming down the line, and some of the ones he made in Rogue One. I hadn't considered it from that angle either, but I think it's a good angle.
Well, the reason I say, I'll just say this. Luthen very much is, one of his key things about his character is he is constantly the one insisting, I know you, Cassian. Like, actually, Cassian hasn't said that much about himself to Luthen. It's really just been up until this point, this episode, at the very beginning, it was kind of like Luthen was saying that so much, I know you, and then pushing his, you've got to come with me, you've got to do this, to where Cassian finally said, hey, I was on Mumbat and blah, 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 and again, with that lie, as you were saying, but I think that was just, that characteristic was just so particularly abusive to me, like someone who constantly is saying that. So again, Luthen, a very interesting character. Now, one of the things that when we looked at episode 1 through 3, it was missing that spiritual side for me that we got in Rogue One, with some talk about the Force in Rogue One. So now we have Luthen with this blue kyber crystal that he gives to Cassian. I'm wondering if he has a spiritual side or if he knew someone who was more attuned and interested in the Force. Did you guys have any thoughts on kind of that side of things, the spiritual side of things with Andor at all?
I noticed a little bit when they were on the planet Algani, and they're walking back to their the camp. She's telling him how where everybody left. Well, there's still a few people there, and they're talking about mystics. And then later on, they discuss the temple. It almost makes me wonder if it could be a Jedi temple or maybe even a Sith temple. I don't know. But the fact that she's talking about the mystics, it makes me wonder if those are Force sensitives out there, and they just don't even really understand what that is.
Good point.
Or they're hiding it.
Right. Yeah. Patrick, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, the kyber crystal was interesting because, he tells Andor, don't take less than 50,000 for it, and I want it back. If you sell it, that's fine. Just make sure you get this much money, and then also go get it back. I think that's a pretty interesting set of directives. So it belies. There's obviously there's something about it that Luthen cherishes or treasures, but it's not enough to hold it no matter what. And for me, that's sort of he's ultimately committed to the cause, right? This my guess is this belonged to somebody who the Empire took from him, whether it was a loved one, a wife, a father, a mother, something of that nature, sister, brother. I'm guessing somebody, and he got it from them. And now he's holding on to it. Alternatively, he could have his own belief system about the Force as well and cherish it, just as the character from Rogue One. I find it, after sort of the prequels came out, and you have the gap between episode 3 and episode 4 kind of determine 17 years, 16 years, right? It's Luke's lifespan, and you go from episode 3, where the Jedi are a very well-known thing, the Force is a well-known thing, it's a galaxy-wide thing, to 16 years later, Tarkin saying that he is Vader is the last vestiges of a dead religion. And you're like, how do you get there in 16 years? That is just impressive. So I don't know if that speaks to the Empire's ability to sort of just wash secularism over whatever, religious or spiritual nature was in the galaxy at the time, or if there's all this kind of hiddenness to it. And I think the display of the kyber crystal sort of points to that more. There's a hidden side to this. People are sort of hiding their religion now because they know the Empire is not about it, but they have to keep it under wraps. They have to go underground with it.
Right. Yeah. So this is interesting. This is also, the kyber crystal is a connection to Rogue One, because we also saw Jin's mother giving her a kyber crystal that she wore around her neck. So very interesting kind of connections. I hope we learn more about that as we go on. But let's talk about how Luthen brings Cassian to this ragtag team who are on this really dangerous mission. And they're led by a character named Vel, who to me seems to have a pretty strong relationship with Luthen. So what did you guys think about the team's reaction to Cassian? Did you think that it was believable enough? And how do you expect that ultimately, that bringing in this new person and it's Cassian, how will that impact the mission, do you think, going forward?
I think they were legitimately and understandably upset. And I think she pulled off a good lie, saying that that she just wasn't sure if she could get him there in time. But obviously everybody would be mad, and now they've got to change all their plans too. Not only does he have to learn what they're supposed to do, they have to change their plans to accommodate. So I'd be right there with them.
Yeah, so I recently moved into a management position in the company I work for, and we operate our power plants with typically small teams, 7 or 8 person teams. And this was just so familiar when you bring a new guy in, especially a new guy who has a bunch of experience. And he's like, okay, can you run these machines? Can you do this? And you have guys in the team who are just like, yeah, give him a chance. He can do it. And folks in the team who are like, to heck with him. Like, we don't need him. We can. And especially from the viewpoint of Vel, because Vel knows he's a contractor, right? She knows that he's not invested. Like, he's not a company man. He's not part of the rebellion or I think Andor lists 5 or 6 different groups. He's not part of any of those groups. But she also knows she can't tell the team that, because if she does, they all lose trust in him. But she also knows by not telling the team that, if it comes out, they're all going to lose trust in her. And at the same point, Andor is sitting there trying to figure out, how do I build trust with the team, which ultimately is going to come through him actually successfully doing something or helping them. Because that's in real world situations, when you jam somebody into a new team or a new person into a team, it almost always comes down to, can they do the job? Can they do their work? And that's how the trust gets built. So I found all of that extraordinarily believable. It's like they'd done their homework, or at least all of the writers had like been in those situations, which I'm guessing is more true, because it's a commonality. When you're joining a new team at work or whatever you're doing, you have to go through this sort of proving phase. And at the same time, if there's conditions on how you're there, or how you're acting, there's these secondary levels of trust that go with the leader and the team, and how you integrate with both of them, and then how you integrate with upper management, which would be Luthien at this point. And so this is all like, and not only that, when I first came into the company I'm currently at, this was very much my situation. Like, I got brought in, I was headed towards upper management at a different company. And when I came into the plant I work at now, I was inserted as a man on the ground. I was like frontline outside operator worker. And so it was like, I had guys walk up to me and go, "Are you a corporate spy? Are you working for upper management and here to spy on us?" And so this was very believable. I was like, I've seen this before.
Right. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I think we can open up kind of this discussion about leadership in this show, because I think that is one of the core themes that I'm picking up on. And even, during our discussion, it's really come up already quite a bit. There's a whole lot of lying going on. There's a whole lot of hiding going on. And obviously it is a spy show, but at the same time, it's kind of demonstrating to us that this early rebellion, project or whatever it is, was built on a whole lot of that. And it just kind of makes you wonder and really reflect on the impact that lying can really have ultimately on the bonds of trust. Val did not know about Cassian. She doesn't know Cassian. Cassian didn't know about the garrison. The team didn't know about Cassian, and apparently they still don't know about Luthien. So, let alone Mon Mothma or anything else, right? So, how do we deal in those situations? That's just kind of what I'm thinking about right now, is like, how do we deal with those situations when we just have to put our trust in the leadership and just kind of accept the situation, right? It's not exactly the most, I don't know if I can completely do the job 100% if I know that my leadership has been lying to me. So I can definitely empathize with the team on that end.
Just to add to that, like, it's an entire organization run on duplicity, right? Like it's one face, like Mon Mothma, it's one face to the crowd, one face back here. For Luthien, it's one face to the crowd, it's one face back here. For Andor, it's one face to all of his friends, and one face running this side mission where he's trying to find his sister. It's like everybody involved has a duplicitous nature just to survive. And You're right. Like, what does that do to the organization as a whole? That's a really good point to think about it.
Yeah. So I guess moving on from there, we can kind of get into some of the other leadership figures that we were introduced to in episode 4. We mentioned Major Partagaz as the head of the Imperial Security Bureau, or the ISB. And he really, to me, this is possibly, if he continues to be a character that we see, he could possibly be one of the more impactful just characters that I remember from this show. He gave such a strong impression. So what were your first impressions of Partagaz, and did he or did he not give you any flashbacks to work situations and bosses in the past?
I've never worked for anybody necessarily that callous.
Oh, good.
But he gave me flashbacks to Tarkin and Krennic and all those guys. It's like they must go through a leadership camp that tells them that this is how they have to be in charge. It's so short. I mean, just the way he ends the conversation with Deidre, he's like, "We're done," and he walks out the room. Just I don't think I would like working for somebody like that, but to each his own, I guess.
I loved every minute of the ISB stuff. Every minute. So I work in the power industry, and somewhere between 70 to 90% of the power industry is ex-Navy folks, with some ex-Air Force, ex-Army guys thrown in there, occasionally a Marine. And that's just how they operate. Like, I've been in that meeting on many occasions. I've watched that management style play out. I've been called out like that before. Like, yep, you read it right from the book, and that's not what we do at all. Here's what we do. I enjoyed it. I thought it spoke a lot to the writers. And honestly, it is a management style. It's not necessarily the best, quote unquote, but it's a very abrupt, very brusque, this is what it is, and this is how we go. And it's very interesting to see that management style operated in the ISB itself, because you would think it's a security organization, so there would be all these levels of like subterfuge and two-facedness and everything. And this management style is very much not that. Like, it's very much like, come in, punch you in the face with how I feel and what I feel about you. And you would think more of somebody who, was a spider and dangling a lot of people in different directions and kind of forcing them to backbite and backfight. And this guy is like not about that. He's like, no, you're overstepping your bounds, walk back. These are your good qualities. Okay, end of conversation, I'm out. And I really enjoy I don't know why, but it did bring me a lot back to work. And I don't know. It's just very interesting to me to see the ISB, internally, and to see them operate that way. Because it's not necessarily a way I would have expected. It's just weird. I guess for me, it's because the ISB is something like a CIA, FBI kind of conglomeration.
Right.
You wouldn't expect them to have like a boardroom meeting like that necessarily, where they've got all those folks in there and they speak extraordinarily plainly. So for me, it was really neat. And I've always loved the ISB just in general as like this entity within the Empire that nobody really knew a lot about or spoke a lot about, but they knew it was there. So I don't know. I enjoyed the heck out of it. And I really like that character. And I thought he was vastly more well-rounded than he could have been. Because I think they could have done all of the very forceful management style stuff with him and left it at that. But when he turned, is it Deidre? Dedra. He turns to her and then starts saying, okay, look, this is your career path. You got brought here over from, the Navy or the fleet, and, you're fighting an uphill battle, and I know, and that's bad, but we can't do anything about it. But these are the things you need to do. And so he's mentoring her. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's it's a management technique, and that it was like, oh, he is not a one-dimensional character. He actually has a little more to him. And I think you guys are right. I really want to see where this guy goes or what he ends up being.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was just recently in a conversation with my husband about how direct communication can save so many troubles from happening. But at the same time, I'm watching this scene and I'm thinking, yeah, but if you're really, really direct, there can also be some other challenges there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And definitely, I'm hearing a lot of work things coming up. So again, a lot of adult sort of situations. One of the things that I found interesting that I don't know if y'all picked up on or not is that Partagaz called all the other officers by their last name, but Dedra he called by her first name. And I confirmed this by going to good old Wikipedia and finding out that Dedra was her first name. And I personally, I hear what you're saying, that he was mentoring her, quote unquote, but I also felt some of the male-female dynamic happening intentionally because, for example, she insists that there's this pattern that she has an instinct, needs to be investigated. And he's like, sorry. I was watching that situation and I just out loud, I was like, sorry, honey, it's a man's world. Nobody cares how you feel. Like, this is about facts. So I definitely saw that, so the woman's coming up and she's having this instinctual feeling that something needs to happen and she's being called by her first name and so there was a lot of things that I could kind of relate to in that situation. You're right that he was sort of giving her some direction, but at the same time, I think he was kind of backhandedly speaking to her as well. So not the most healthy work environment, I would say.
No, I fully agree.
Well, he mentioned that she had a really high bar that she had to live up to. It almost implied that, you are a woman and you have to, if you want to succeed here, you're going to have to show us.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're seeing and it's good to see because I was a little bit worried, but as a lot of the shows as we've moved from, kind of the episode 3 era towards the episode 4 era. In the episode 3 era, the Empire is very progressive. I don't know how else to put that word, but there's lots of non-humans, women, and people of color. But by the time you make it to episode 4, it's all white men, period. That's it. That's what the Empire, and I don't know if that's just the way casting worked in the 70s in England, and that's what we got stuck with. But it's been interesting to see as the shows go, as the aliens slowly get phased out, and then now we're seeing the women kind of get phased out. And so it's the good old Empire you know and love to hate, because it's just this thing that it is. It's just this terribly bigoted monster.
Well, some of the books, the Thrawn series, they've been, I guess you would call it a retcon. They keep talking about how the Emperor, especially when they're talking about Thrawn, everybody's amazed that, this blue-skinned chiss is so high in the ranks, even, at all in the ranks.
Right.
And because of how his affinity to humans is and everything. So I think maybe they're going, I see where you're going, and then they're using the books and canon to sort of explain that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, it's funny because, Patrick, as you were saying, the casting was probably just that's the way it was, but maybe George Lucas thought it through. Who knows?
It's hard
maybe
to say,
it just
really.
seems to work out because that was his intention. Who knows? But I think it's going to be more and more intriguing as we go on to see these ISB scenarios. And, with this situation coming up, now we have 2 security organizations that we've kind of seen inside of within this series already in 4 episodes. So to me, it's obvious that Andor is setting out to kind of explore this theme of security. And what do you think? Do you have any thoughts at this point on what sort of lessons are being driven home. When I'm looking at it, I'm thinking about what Partagaz said, there is no true security. He also said some things that kind of had some language I wasn't 100% comfortable with, like getting diseases out of the way. But ultimately, we're talking about lying and honesty and trust, things like that. To me, that is where security lies. If you have those bonds of trust and mutual respect, that is the ultimate security. You can take other measures, but I don't know, ultimately, I don't think you can find security anywhere else. You guys have any thoughts on that? Security? Yeah, it's...
Well, I think, oddly enough, the first thing that comes to my mind is 1984.
Yeah.
And the trust that the main character, whose name I can't remember, has in his boss, or I guess boss's boss, or whatever, one of the party members, that it kind of befriends him and sort of befriends him and convinces him that he's part of the rebellion, right, that's fighting against Big Brother, and eventually turns on him, right? And you realize, oh no, this was just a front set up to catch folks who wanted to rebel. That's what it kind of, I don't know why that triggered it to me, but that's sort of the thing. It's sort of because Cassian's going into counterintelligence. He's not necessarily just intelligence. It's sort of a weird double-edged sword, because he's going into a world where, yeah, they're trying to pull off a heist, more or less. But at the same time, you see from Luthien's side of the ball, it's a lot of trying to figure out what the Empire is trying to find out from them. Because Luthien seems to know all about the security files on Cassian, and that they're coming for him already. And so he obviously knows this stuff. And that's not necessarily intelligence as much as it's counterintelligence. You're figuring out what the other guy's going to do to you because of the stuff they figured out about you. Right. So yeah, it's interesting because, like, it's always a trust game in that world, but you're constantly having to switch masks and build trust with the mask. But how do you move that into the person itself, or move that trust from one mask to the other? That's hard. I gotta imagine that's hard, and that's psychologically damaging.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm really curious to see how they deal with that, the whole psychology of it, as we go forward. But let's talk about Cassian, since you brought him up. We see him at the beginning of the episode basically stating to Luthen that he believes in taking from the Empire just so he can live a better life. And based on that, he doesn't believe in any kind of ideal or, fighting for the cause. So, we've looked a lot in episodes 1 through 3 at his past, at his childhood, and what he went through. What do you think it is that drives Cassian to just, make a good life for himself? And he doesn't want to, at this point, to, fight for the cause. He doesn't necessarily want to fight against the Empire because they're the bad guys. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think it comes from his parents. I mean, we got a little bit of glimpse of Clem, his dad, and his mom. I think that's what they were doing back in the Clone Wars when he was a kid. They were just trying to get stuff out of that ship so they could survive. They were, so I think that's been ingrained in him, since they took him to save him. That's been ingrained in him over those years, just to live your life and try to do right. I think he's doing right the wrong way in some instances. But that, I think in his mind, that's him trying to do right. On in the Blade Runner scene, when he's just trying to find his sister, he just ended up in a bad situation and handled it the best way he knew how. So and, you know, trying to live their lives on Ferrix. I think it's just everybody's just trying to get along and keep along, and he's just doing it the best way he knows how. He's just got himself in trouble the wrong way. So I think a lot of it comes from his parents.
That's a great point.
I think the heart of it's probably going to end up going back to his sister, and it's not like we've seen in the flashbacks not quite a bit, but some interaction between him and his sister and the importance there, and then him getting taken away from this tribe of children effectively. Like I never noticed any adults, and I thought that was really, really, really interesting. I didn't know. I still thinking about it, I can't really get to like what they were implying or meant by that, but he's separated from his sister, and he seems to be looking for her in the wrong places, like places where she would be if things went badly for her. And I think that implies something, hopefully they're going to reveal later on, about his, like, the real reason he went and stole this thing from the Imperials, or the reason he was there, where he was looking for her. And it's interesting because it's a theme, or it's a thread I've noticed in a lot of the Star Wars material that's come out since episode 7. And I only really noticed it after listening to the last podcast, to be honest, but it's abducted children or child trafficking, something of that nature, because you see, episode 7, 8, 9, the New Order, First Order, whatever it is, the Final Order, like all of the stormtroopers are abducted kids, right? And then you see Solo, like his life in Solo, both at that time and then later on, him interacting with the criminal organizations, the movement of children, and even The Mandalorian is a show about the most expensively, trafficked alien ever, right? like it's just this theme, this thread I keep seeing come up, and I think it's going to play out in Andor. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's going to be one of the payoffs of that thread, is Andor looking for his sister, because I get the feeling from some of the stuff they said that the rest of that tribe of kids, which exists as a tribe of kids for an unknown reason, is going to get taken by the Empire, or taken by some subset of the Empire, or some group, and farmed out. And that's why Andor is looking for her. Could be a red herring. It could just, have jumped down a rabbit hole they didn't intend to make, but that's kind of like where I think a lot of his deep down internal drive for why he does things comes from. But I think at the same time, very likely, all information about his sister is just ridiculously difficult to come by. And in the meantime, he's got to make a living. And why not try and make it off of the biggest guy, biggest kid on the block kind of a thing.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. So I'll say this, I shared a bit on Discord for those of you who are on the SQPN Discord server. We've been discussing a little bit about why small child Casa smashes up the intruder's ship after seeing his reflection inside of it. And I was thinking that he was looking at his reflection on this surface in the ship. And he was saying, well, I've only seen myself in water, and now I can see myself clearly only through this thing that these outsiders have. But they're the ones that have come in here, have taken, my friend away from me, have come to hurt us. And now I see myself, and my face is dirty, and I'm angry. And he just knocks that thing over, starts at it. As you're talking about trafficked children, I was thinking about how Casa was taken. He didn't ask to leave. He was taken, and realizing that, I think his anger, he doesn't have a home. He doesn't really have a family necessarily. He's got this thing around him that is his adopted family and these friends and whatnot. But it doesn't really seem like he's a guy that just feels like he can go home and put up his feet, you know? I mean, he doesn't seem like the kind of person that can really feel at home. So I want to say that also has a lot to do with his motivations, his feeling like I don't want to fight for somebody else if nobody has ever fought for me. And so the other thing that I wanted to bring up in talking about Cassian is that Diego Luna has actually described the story of Andor as a migrant story. So he sees Andor as a migrant. And he said, quote, "It's the journey of a migrant. That feeling of having to move is behind this story very profoundly and very strong. That shapes you as a person. It defines you in many ways and what you are willing to do." Unquote. So, you know, we've seen definitely a lot of movement in Cassian. Does that quote stir up any thoughts for you as far as Cassian's motivations and his character? The movement.
I think it's like the end of episode 3 is on like full-blown stereo display, where you have the twin shots of Andor the child, or Cassian the child, you know, taken by these two individuals who showed up in the ship while he was smashing it, and in the spaceship, and Andor the adult in the back of Luthien's spaceship, you know, going into the great beyond, and neither of them knowing exactly where they're going. That to me was just sort of like them the director's like yelling that at me, like that's what this is about, and I'm like, okay. So I think it's true. I think he's right. I think it's at least that seems to be one of the big points the directors are trying to get across to us, is that Andor is not at home really anywhere, and his story is a story of migrations. And those are at least the two big ones we see.
Yeah, I mean, I have a really close friend actually who is a young priest, and he was an Air Force brat. So he was moving from place to place very regularly every few years. And so he just got used to this situation where he would not develop strong friendships with anyone until he got to college, where I met him. And he realized that he wanted to become a priest and stay where we went to college. And so he found himself after that number of years where it was like, okay, my psychology is ready to get up and move out, where he had this internal struggle of like, okay, no, this is where I'm going to stay. So I have to make these roots. And I'm not used to that. I'm not used to making attachments to people like that. And so I find that particularly interesting about Cassian, is that he's got to have something like that going on in his mind, that maybe he doesn't, maybe he just, everybody's just, you know, kind of in his life for a reason. And that reason is that reason. And then, you know, nothing beyond that. I'm curious, you know, how that's going to play out. And then also just, you know, I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, but with my family also was going back and forth between Texas and Mexico, not myself, but my dad and my grandparents and so forth. And so knowing how that affected them, and kind of when you're in that situation, you don't really feel like you belong in one place or another. I think that also will definitely come to pass, and we'll see more with Cassian. I think that kind of makes him a good candidate for being a spy and being that counterintelligence guy.
Yeah, because he doesn't really fit in anywhere specifically, but he has to make himself fit where he's at.
Exactly. And he does choose a new name for himself in this episode, Clem, which, as we just discussed, is his adopted father's name. And in fact, Andor is Clem's last name. So that is where Cassian has gotten his name, from his adopted parents. And we know that he was called Casa on his home planet and his family. So now let's talk a little bit more about Mon Mothma, someone whose name we've known very well, but the character as such we have not. We've finally gotten to see into her life and the politics situation. What did this whole first look into Mon Mothma's life, did it meet your expectations? Did you have any hopes for what it was going to be like seeing her? I'd love to know what were your first impressions of all that?
I seem to think that, kind of unlike Luthen, she does have to play a little bit of a role in the politics, but beyond that, and how she had to hide from her driver to talk to Luthen privately. But beyond that, I think she's the same. She seemed to me to be the same person at home as she is, all the time. Her motivations are all about the people that she's trying to help, and it's clear that she doesn't have to live the lifestyle that everybody's trying to, that she's trying to help, but she doesn't change her philosophy, her theories, even at home. She tells her husband, you're inviting these people that are doing exactly what we don't want them to do, what I'm trying to fight against, and you're having them here at a party. That doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah. So there was definitely a lot of, back and forth with her and her husband, and we can talk about that again, the theme of trust. Patrick, what were your first thoughts on seeing Mon Mothma?
I really enjoyed, this was, I just really enjoyed this episode overall. Like, I loved all the ISB stuff. I loved all her stuff. I loved the Luthen Andor stuff. I love the Andor beating the team stuff. For her, it was very much something that called back to Leia and even Padme in previous memory, right? So, or I guess Leia's to come, right? But you see sort of, especially in episode 4, when Darth Vader comes on the ship and he starts talking to her and she's like, I'm a senator. There's this beleagueredness, I'm doing right by my people but I'm under this heel, this boot. And you can see the same kind of thing going on with Mon Mothma and her interaction with Luthen. And then the conversation between her and her husband was phenomenal. I don't know how else to put it, because it's this, I can see both parties. I can see her, she's beleaguered. She's trying to figure out how to help this rebellion that she's a part of and she started, and she knows she's going to hang if she gets found out. And now her husband has invited people that are counteracting her policies within the Senate and have done some terrible things apparently that are going to cause a bunch of people to starve, it looks like. And now she's going to have a dinner party with them, and she doesn't want that kind of a stress. She's realizing that she's going to have to don the guise. She's going to have to put on the counterintelligence, the intelligence mask in order not to be found out. And there's a lot of reluctance on her part. And the same part, I see the husband, he's kind of like I have a thing I can do, and that's entertainment. I'm not an important senator. I'm not an important person. Nobody really knows me. And I did this thing that I told you about a month ago. Yeah. And now it
was on your calendar.
Right, exactly. And now you just want to tear it apart. And I was looking forward to having a fun night. I was going to watch the football game with everybody here. It was going to be great. We were going to have pizza and beer. And now I can't because your job, and you apparently hate these people now. And
and she took his present back.
Yeah. And now I don't even get a birthday present. It's just, it was very real. It struck me as this is a very real conversation I can see, especially with individuals who are in power, with their spouses, and the interplay that has to become like their whole life, especially when they're public figures. And then sort of the extra dimension to that is Mon Mothma's part, which is not only is she a public figure and she has to do these things and she's like always on, but at the same time, now I have to put on my disguise and be someone I'm not. And because my husband is friends with these people that I have to hide from, now I've got to hide from him too. Like there's that I think maybe she doesn't realize it yet, but I feel like she's starting to get a glimmer of that through that interaction. The fact that she is going to have to hide who she is, even from her husband, which I don't know how else you blow up like a trust hole in a relationship, but that's a good way to do it, right? Like I have this, I have this whole second life where I talk with a British accent and I have a peg leg. Just go with it. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean, they were really hammering home the idea that she is not safe anywhere. And then we get that scene at home where she is definitely not safe there either. To just let her hair down and gosh, be that Mon Mothma, awesome person that we so enjoy. I really appreciated seeing that different dimension, that personal dimension, and how she lost that too. So they're really building up this character who gave a lot to the cause of the rebellion, really gave her whole life to it. So I really loved that. Now to kind of close things up, we've got to talk about Deputy Inspector Karn and where will he go now that he's been kicked out of his job, told that he will not be replaced, and slapped by his mother?
I got a whole prodigal son sort of vibe with that. If you notice, it's almost like a reverse of the prodigal son, where in the prodigal son story, the parable, Jesus tells the story of the kid taking all of his money from his father and going out and squandering it. And then he ends up, eating with the pigs, wishing he could eat with the pigs, actually. Where in this situation, he is he's trying to change his stars, basically. And he's ending up in trying to climb the ranks real fast. And he thinks he's doing the right thing by going and chasing Cassian. He's just never done it. And he didn't do it right. And really, Luthen is the one that saved the day. But now he's like completely shell-shocked. He's never seen a battle, so he had to watch all the people that he took into battle die. And now he's kicked out of his job. He's completely demoralized. He only said one word in this episode, and it was mother. Mm-hmm. And it's basically him going back home. Whereas if you notice, he had to go down in the elevator. He had to go down from his higher ranks down to the level where he doesn't want to be, but he knows where he belongs. So if you were asking me, I think he's going to end up in the rebellion at some point. He spoke a whole lot with one word.
Interesting. Patrick, what do you think of Karn?
I think so. ISB scene when the ISB officer is dressing down the three security guys. Loved it. Been in the room for that before. Hated it when I was in the room. Because typically what you see is two gung-ho workers screw something up and get somebody hurt or just mess something up. And then they're getting dressed down. And then on top of that, their boss is getting dressed down. But it was very real. Like that's very real. It's not only just like real to workplace. It's also very Empire. Like right. You screwed up and now the Empire's in charge. Thanks. This reminds me of how Houston runs things, oddly enough, but that's a whole different story. So I really loved him. I love the elevator scene, like you saw, watching him go down, because like in the lead up to that scene with him in the elevator, I got tricked, and I don't know whether the guys in charge or the director was trying to do this or not, but I thought we were in Coruscant. And then I started to see the shadows, and I started to see the dinginess, and I started to see the little off coloration, and I was like, wait, we're not on Coruscant, are we? And then you see him and you're like, oh, we're on his planet and he's on like the top level and everything's beautiful and you can see the sky. And then he starts to go down and you kind of see it's like his descent, like exactly like you said, it's like his descent into his own personal hell or whatever. Like I've been humiliated, right? I am at the level of my humiliation. I have to go hat in hand back to my parents, who immediately slaps me upon seeing me, after saying mother, slapped and then hugged in traditional family fashion. And, yeah, he's got the two choices. He's got the two paths in front of him right now, which is I have been humiliated. Do I react with humility and recognize what happened to me and what I did wrong and like why it was probably wrong or why it was wrong? And then that path, I think, does lead him into the rebellion eventually. Or does he double down on the other side and go, you know what, the Empire did to me was good and it was right. And obviously that means the Empire's got it right and I need to join up. And we're going to see him as some officer in the Navy down the line. So I'm like so curious to see where he's going to go. And I would love either path. Like either path is, I think he's a great villain. I think he would be a great villain turned hero. So yes, very, very interested to see where he goes.
Yeah, I would believe either path. Absolutely. What about all of you who are listening? What did you think of all these characters and situations that we found in episode 4 and going forward? We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to email us, you can email us at starwars@sqpn.com, or you can find StarQuest on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. You can leave a comment there or simply tweet us at SQPN and be sure to share the podcast on social media. Guys, did you have any final thoughts about episode 4?
I can't wait to see the dinner scene and the heist. I'm excited.
Yeah, very, very excited. I love that it's adult, but not adult in a bad way. And I really love this episode because of that.
Awesome. Well, I am definitely looking forward to that dinner party as well, because I want to see how that husband-wife relationship continues with that phenomenal writing, as you put it, Patrick. So that's definitely something I'm looking forward to also. I want to see that weird comet star thing that happens on, on Aldani. I definitely want to see that. All right. So as we've got to shout out some stars, by the way, who help make this podcast a reality, and that would be our patrons. So we want to give a shout out, especially to a few of them: Fonseca B, Mary C, Jeffrey M, Richard H, and Michael F. And you too can feel the rush of endorphins hearing your name called, knowing that you have helped to continue the mission of StarQuest by becoming a patron at sqpn.com/give.
This StarQuest show is brought to you by Tim Shevlin's Personal Fitness Training for Catholics, providing spiritual and physical wellness through personalized nutrition, workout and prayer programs, and daily accountability check-ins. Learn more by visiting fitcatholics.com.
Well, Patrick and Jason, I'm really glad that you were able to join me, to have met you, and looking forward to more episodes with you. But, this podcast, this whole episode and this podcast would be no good if nobody listens to it, right? So we've got to ask everybody, please continue to subscribe to Secrets of Star Wars in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or on the SQPN YouTube channel. And you can also find previous episodes at sqpn.com/Star Wars. Listen to the show as well as share the show. And if you do a rating and a review, even better, to help us let more people know about the show. All right. Well, next week we will be back for a deeper look into the 5th episode of Andor. Until next time, Jason Eugea, thank you for joining me in the Secrets of Star Wars.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this.
And
I'm kind of starstruck, guys.
And Patrick Mason, it's great to have you on as well. Looking forward to more.
Me too. This was wonderful. Thank you again.
And thank you all for listening. Once again, I'm Angela Sealana, and thank you for listening to Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest. Take care.
Here's Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy. The Secrets of Doctor Who. Find the show wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Doctor Who.